Hi and welcome to a special edition of Box Talk Sports. Today's episode, in commence of the Stanley Cup playoffs starting in 3 days, it's got me excited. I want to tell you my top 10 players of all time in NHL history. Now, I know you're saying I've heard top 10 lists, I've seen them, I've watched them. Throw them out the window. The garbage. I'm going to tell you the absolute purest top 10 list of NHL players all time from 1917 to when the league started to today. I'm not going to be biased on if you played in today's game, back then. I'm going to look at criteria of number one, winning. Did you win Stanley Cups? How many did you win? Obviously, production, goals, assists, points. We're looking at leadership. We're looking at performance in the playoffs. We're looking at performance at the finals. We're taking all this into consideration. We're focusing on players and defensemen, not goalies. And we're going to give you the top 10 of all time. So let's go. Number 10, the only European on my list. And yes, I know you might think, hey, what's going on with that? Well, it's a Canadian game, and my list is dominated by Canadians, but you'll see why soon. But I did include one European. He's a defenseman. He's from Sweden, and it's Nicholas Lidstrom. My opinion, the second best defenseman to ever play in the NHL. He won 7 Norris Trophy as the greatest defenseman in the league. He won 4 Stanley Cups and was a pillar at the back end for the Red Wings for their dynasty. Not a huge physical specimen. It's not going to smush your head into the boards, but in my opinion, the best stick-checking defenseman of all time. He also led the league when his scoring was down with 80 points for defensemen in the season. But you had the 7 Norrises, the 4 Stanley Cups, and if you heard any players tell you who was hard to play against, it was Nicholas Lidstrom. Couldn't touch the guy. Number 10 on my list. Number 9 is my only active player, still playing, Sidney Crosby. And he could move up the list, but right now I got him at 9. We know the resume. 3 Stanley Cups, been to 4, gold medal for Team Canada. Just moved into 10th all-time on the league scoring list, eclipsing 1,000 assists. Finals MVP. What more can you say about Sidney Crosby? It's a shame he's not going to make the playoffs this year, but I got him number 9 on my list. Will probably move up to 8, 7. He's only 36. He's probably got 3, 4 more good years. Hopefully he doesn't waste them in Pittsburgh. But that's where I got Crosby, highest active player on my list. Number 8, Stevie Y. And Stevie just edges out Crosby, and I'll tell you why that is. So they both have 3 Stanley Cups. They both were captains. They both went to 4 finals. But Stevie in his younger years was more of a scorer. I mean, 65 goals, 155 points in a season, which is third best to Wayne and Mario. Then he made the transition into a leader, a captain, won back-to-back cups, a total of 3 with the Red Wings. So I have him slightly above Crosby in number 8. Number 7 is, my opinion, the best pure goal scorer that the league's ever seen. And it's Mike Bossy. Only played 10 years in the league. 9-time 50-goal scorer, which is an all-time record shared by Ovechkin and Gretzky. 9 consecutive 50-goal seasons, which is an all-time record. And retired after his 10th season in the league with 38 goals. Even when the guy had a bad year, he still scored 38 goals. Won 4 Stanley Cups with the Islanders consecutively in the early 80s. Highest goals per game in the modern NHL. And in my opinion, the best pure goal scorer of all time. Rest in peace, Mike. Number 7 on my list. Number 6, one of my favorites, Mark Messier. Third all-time in points in the National Hockey League. 6 Stanley Cup victories. 4 under the wing of Wayne Gretzky in Edmonton. Then when Gretzky and Coffey were all gone, he still managed to win another in 1990. Then he goes to New York. They haven't won in 50 years, no problem. Guarantees a Game 6 win over the Devils with a trick. Goes on to Game 7, wins that, and hoists Stanley again for his 6th Stanley Cup championship. He's also won a Conn Smythe when he was on the Oilers with Gretzky as the playoff MVP. What can you say? The Moose, number 6. Number 5, we're going to go back in time. We're going to go to the 40s. And a lot of people don't give this guy as much credit and put him in the GOATs of hockey, but I do. It's Maurice Rocket Richard. First player ever to score 50 goals in a season. 50 games back then, he banged in 50. There wasn't another guy to score 50 goals in the league for 17 consecutive years after that. Think about that. He scores 50. Nobody else in the entire league touches 50 till Bobby Hull 17 years later. He won 8 Stanley Cups. He won 5 in a row, and he finished his career with 544 goals as the all-time NHL goal leader. Rocket Richard. He was mean, he was feisty, he was fast, and he was a winner. Number 5 on my list. Number 4, it's Mr. Hockey. What can I say? Gordie Howe. 26 seasons in the NHL, 4 Stanley Cups in the NHL. Never hit 50 goals, but every year was banging 35, 40 goals in. Like I said, 4 Stanley Cups. Everybody knows about the Gordie Howe hat trick, goal assist fight. He was mean. He was tough. He won. Mr. Hockey. 3rd all-time in goals in his career. Number 4 on my list. Number 3, in my opinion, is the most talented hockey player, most skilled player to ever play the game. And if it wasn't for health circumstances, probably would have been higher on the list. But it's Mary Lemieux at number 3. 2-time Cup winner. Didn't even play 1,000 games in the NHL, but amassed 1,700 points. 199 in a season. 85 goals in a season. But cancer hit him for a year. He was retired for 3 years. And still all with this, was able to get into the top 10 scoring of all time. Iconic goals against the Minnesota North Stars in 1992 to win that championship. I have him at, obviously the Canada Cup in 87 with Wayne. I have him at number 3 on my list. Number 2 on my list is the greatest defenseman of all time. It's Don Cherry's favorite player. He said the greatest. I disagree. I have him at number 2. It's Bobby Orr. First defenseman to get 100 points in a season, 100 assists in a season, 2-time Stanley Cup champion, holds the record for 139 points in a season for the Boston Bruins. I mean, if it wasn't for injuries in his knees and only limiting, again, another guy who didn't play 1,000 games, only played, I believe, 9-10 seasons. But, man, could he fly. Bobby Orr, number 2. And before I get to number 1, which we all know, it's not a huge surprise here, I just want to go over a couple notables, why they didn't make the list, because I know you're out thinking, well, I think you forgot about somebody, but I didn't. I went over this very carefully, and the 10 guys that I left off were Joe Sakic, 2 Stanley Cup champion, top 10 in points all time. But some of these players just scored more points. They won more cups. He had a fantastic career, but not a top 10. Ovechkin might end up as the greatest goal scorer or most goal scorer, highest goal scorer in league history. 9-time 50-goal scorer. But he only won 1 cup, and he's not even in the top 15 in points. Yager, again, I knock him. Second all-time in points. He has 2 cups, but they were under the shadow of Lemieux. Ray Bourque only got the 1 cup at the end of his career. All-time points in a defenseman, but he played for 20-plus years. And only to win the 1 Stanley Cup is his knock. Paul Coffey, on the other hand, won 4 cups. Had most goals in a season, second most points in a season as a defenseman, but really focused on the offensive in the 80s with the Oilers and the early 90s with the Penguins. Knock him for, a bit of defensive play. Jean Beliveau, greatest Habs captain and leader probably of all time. 10 Stanley Cups he won, but those teams were just so stacked. Lafleur, again, 60-goal guy, 1,200 points. Cup champion 4 in a row with the Habs, but again, falls into that realm of the teams were just so good at that time. Brett Hull, 2-time Stanley Cup champion, probably the second best purest goal scorer to Mike Bossy of all time. Knock on him is he only won the 2 cups, more of a secondary player with Dallas and the Red Wings later on in his career. Bobby Hull, his dad, fantastic player, but only won 1 cup. Was the second guy to score 50 from Richard, first player to ever win $1 million, but then kind of went to the WHA. And Scott Niedermayer. It was hard to leave this guy off because he's won everything. Gold medals, world champions, world junior champions, Stanley Cups, Conn Smythe. He played on a lot of great teams, Devils and Ducks, won a lot of cups, but he just didn't have the offensive numbers. So there's the 10 that just missed out. And to recap my 10, we have Nicholas Lidstrom at 10. Crosby, my highest active player, at 9. Stevie Y at 8. Mike Bossy at 7. Mark Messier at 6. Rocket Richard at 5. Gordie Howe at 4. Mario Lemieux at 3. Bobby Orr at number 2. And, of course, the great one, Wayne Gretzky at number 1. And there's no argument out there that you can say that he's not number 1. All-time leader in goals, all-time leader in assists, all-time leader in points. More assists than anybody else's points. More playoff points. 4-time Stanley Cup champion. We just saw McDavid get 100 assists. Congratulations. 4th guy in history. Wayne did it 11 times consecutively. Most Hart trophies. The only guy to get 200 points in a season. Did it 4 times. 92 goals in a season. 163 assists in a season. 215 points in a season. 50 goals in 39 games. You can keep going on and on and on. He was the great one. And the funny thing about that is he wasn't the fastest skater. He didn't have the hardest shot. He wasn't the most physical. He wasn't the biggest. He wasn't the strongest. But he was the smartest hockey player to ever play. And that tells you, kids, it's all not about being the biggest, strongest, and fastest. It's about knowing the game, hockey IQ, and nobody did that better than Wayne. If you look at him, he brought 2 guys, Yari Curry and Bernie Nichols, to 70 goals. The guy was the best. So there you have it. That's my top 10 NHL players of all time. If you disagree, if you have any comments, leave them in the comments section. We're pumped for the playoffs. It's going to be a doozy. The Leafs are in tough to the Bruins. The Oilers probably are going to get Vegas. The 4 MVP candidates this year could all bounce in the first round. It's ridiculous. So anyways, enjoy them. And let me know what you think about this top 10.